meeting is being recorded.
Welcome, everybody, to Boston 9/11 Truth. Today we have Jonathan Cole as our guest speaker. And before I continue with the introductions for Jonathan, I'm just going to quickly read a disclaimer. The views, thoughts, and opinions expressed are the speaker's own and do not necessarily represent the views, thoughts, and opinions of the Boston 9/11 Truth Group. The material and information presented here are for general information and educational purposes. The Boston 9/11 Truth name and all its forms and abbreviations are the property of its owners, and its use does not imply endorsement of or opposition to any specific group, organization, product, or service. Boston 9/11 Truth aims to inspire and promote action by the truth advocates who support them and their efforts.
But what about medical advice? You do give medical advice, don't you?
No, no, not quite. No. No medical advice. Uh, so, without further ado, let me just introduce Jonathan Cole, and I will ask everyone to mute themselves during his presentation. And we'll do a Q&A following his presentation, which will be for about an hour. All right, so Jonathan Cole, P.E., or known as Jon Cole, has been a registered professional and engineer for over 40 years. In late 2007, he realized that something was very wrong with the 9/11 event. In 2010, he began conducting real-world experiments and making videos to either prove or disprove what we were being told about the event, focusing on the physics of how the Twin Towers fell. He probably is best known for his experiments with thermite and his video, The Great Thermate Debate, showing what thermite and thermate can or cannot do. He has several presentations demonstrating that story of the Twin Towers, the story that the Twin Towers fall by gravity alone cannot be true simply by studying just the motion and also by studying the evidence of high temperatures. His experimental work, as well as other videos, can be found on YouTube under the name Physics and Reason, as well as on the website 911speakout.org and on Architects and Engineers website ae911truth.org. He was one of the experts at 2011 Toronto hearings and was one of the 23 members on the Consensus 9/11 panel and recently was a presenter of the Turning the Tide event held in Washington, D.C. This evening, he is going to review some highlights of his most recent videos that focus on the fall of the Twin Towers, and they are the last 30 seconds and where the towers went. Welcome, Jonathan. John or Jonathan, do you prefer?
Either one, either one. Depends if you're mad at me or not, I guess. So John is
Okay.
fine. John is fine. Yeah, thank you very much, Susan, for that introduction. I guess I'm going to need to share my screen here. What I decided to do when you invited me is I'm kind of merging two of my last videos I put together. Let me see if I can get this thing to work here. Hopefully this will. You guys see that or not yet?
Yes,
You
yes, I
can.
see that.
Awesome. Okay, good. Now let's get the slideshow going. So yeah, I used to do a lot of videos, but I kind of slowed down as I'm getting older here. And I did a video last year called The Last 30 Seconds, and that was more on the motion. And then I just did another recent video, which is a little bit more controversial, I'm sure, to some of the folks on this call, called Where the Towers Went. Since they both tie to the towers, I'm not going to talk about Building 7. I'm going to talk just a little teeny tiny bit about some of the other events there you'll see later on, but it's mostly on the fall of the towers. So I tried to merge two PowerPoints together. We'll see how this goes here now. So I guess with that, I'm just gonna start and see if this thing works. So the first one, again, is called The Last 30 Seconds, and it focuses on the fall of the towers. Now, everybody on this call, I'm sure, is not very knowledgeable about the events of 9/11. Some probably far more knowledgeable than I am. Everybody knows about Building 7. That was pretty much an obvious controlled demolition, unless you maybe have some mental issues and you don't quite see that. Some people still don't see it. But if they're being honest, I think everybody understands what happened to Building 7. I think it was a classic controlled demolition coming down at free fall acceleration. The good news is nobody died. Some of the folks got out there just in time, but nobody died. So that was the awesome thing of that. Shanksville, 40 died there. Pentagon, 184 died there. But the Twin Towers, over 2,700 people died in that, including, and the firefighters are well aware of this, 343 firefighters that actually tried to rush in and help those people up there. So all these people died, and that was the biggest event of the 9/11 of that day. I think was a collapse or the fall of the Twin Towers. So you would think that the fall of the Twin Towers should have the most investigation, because that's what killed the most. Well, it turns out when you start digging into this subject, it's hard to believe, but that actually had the least amount of investigation. And so you wonder, well, how did they fall? And the answer is it all depends on when you asked and who you ask. For example, on 9/11 itself, everybody was talking about explosions, and I'm sure a lot of you have seen this.
As we were getting our gear on and making our way to the stairway, there was a heavy-duty explosion.
The whole building just collapsed on us inside the lobby.
Was that a secondary explosion?
Yes, it was.
That was the...
Yeah, definitely secondary explosion.
I heard a second explosion and another rumble.
An hour later than that, we had that big explosion from much, much lower.
It just went boom, it was like a bomb went off. And another explosion came right from it, just everyone flying.
There were numerous secondary explosions taking place in that building. There were continuous explosions.
No, the first explosion, and there was a second explosion in the same building. There were two explosions.
Okay. Federal agencies that were down there do believe that there was some sort of explosive device somewhere else besides the planes hitting.
There was another explosion that took place in one of the towers here. So obviously, according to his theory, he thinks that there were actually devices that were planted in the building.
And so I watched those towers come down, and I remember the day watching it. And I remember a lot of these video clips, and I remember I was here at work with some other people here, and I just kind of said, well, I guess they blew those things up. But after that, it was out of sight, out of mind. I never thought about it again until, again, late 2007. I was completely clueless. I just believed the official story. Why would you question it? So, but I do remember that day, talk about those secondary explosions. The funny part is the next day, there was no mention at all of those explosions. We were told another story. We were told that the steel melted. That was the story that lasted quite a while. Now, here's my local newspaper, which probably is Sarasota Herald Tribune at the top there, which probably ties to the Washington Post. I don't know. It says in just under an hour, raging fire from burning aviation gasoline softened or perhaps even melted the steel strength members. Other examples, Newsweek came out. The intense fires caused the tower to collapse. It melted the structural steel. And what the firemen might not have realized is that gushing jet fuel was melting the steel, as if firemen were complete novices and should have known if they run into a steel frame building that it was just going to melt the steel, which of course we know is nonsense. But that's what we were told. We were also told, the experts told us that it was a progressive pancake collapse. And this little cartoon schematic, there's a lot of little cartoons and little schematics they put together to kind of tell us what happened. So a lot of them told us it was a progressive collapse. And then the problem with a progressive collapse or a pancake collapse is that unlike most other pancake collapses, and on the right there on the left, I show the 12-story Surfside collapse. That happened in Florida a couple of years ago. That thing collapsed down, and you see those first responders, they're standing on top of a pile of about 12 stories. That was a concrete building, but it wasn't a steel frame building, it was a concrete building. Yeah, you can have pancake collapses. You can also have them in earthquakes. The problem with 9/11 and the Twin Towers, of course, is there were no pancakes. There wasn't even the roof out there. They were gone. And so that was kind of a problem for the pancake story right off the bat. We were also told shortly thereafter that no, it really wasn't a pancake collapse, and it really wasn't really the melted steel, but actually what it was a pile driver collapse. And that theory was put forth by a rapid communication that the American Society of Civil Engineers prepared. And it was done by some university professors, and their theory, again, notice we have little stick figures there. We never really show the actual event. Their theory about this pile driver idea is that the small block on the top, that is above where the planes hit, that whole thing failed, and then it drove down the larger, stronger structure below, all the way down to the bottom without the top block being destroyed itself. And then once it drove everything down, then that smaller top block decided to crush itself back up. So they called it the crush down phase and the crush up phase. But the point of this is that we had three different theories from the experts, if you will. Okay, and this is what we were told, either the melting steel theory, and then later on we heard, well, of course, jet fuel can't melt steel beams. It doesn't burn hot enough. The pancake theory, there were no pancakes. And then the pile driver theory, it kind of defies Newton's law, and it doesn't match any experiment. But there was no mention of the explosives that we all heard of the first day. Well, what about the official reports? The first report that came out was the 9/11 Commission report. That was with the 9/11 Commission. I think it was written by Mr. Zelikow. That report in the beginning said it was the fullest possible account of the events of 9/11. And so you say, okay, well, that's the fullest possible account. And it's a big report. I don't know, several hundred pages, maybe 400 or 500 pages. And so again, the collapse of the towers is really, that's in my opinion, that's the biggest deal of the whole thing, because that's where thousands of people died. Well, in that fullest possible account, they only dedicated one sentence for the entire collapse of WTC-1. And they only had two sentences for the collapse of WTC-2. So that was their fullest possible account as far as what happened to the towers. Well, then another report was put together, and this is probably the first real engineering report. A lot of you are familiar with this. It's called the World Trade Center Performance Study, Building Performance Study. And this was done by FEMA and the American Society of Civil Engineers. And so you think, well, the American Society of Civil Engineers, they're a pretty top organization here. They about wrote the book on structural. I have a lot of ASCE books here. I'm a member of ASCE. But they studied that thing, and the bottom line was, all was said and done, they said, with the information and time available, the sequence of events leading up to the collapse of each tower could not be definitively determined. Well, that's odd. They just studied the thing, they did a report, but they couldn't even get the sequence of events that led to the collapse, let alone the collapse itself. So they sort of threw up their hands. We didn't learn a lot there. There was a lot of good information there that they had in the appendices we're going to talk about later, but they couldn't explain the events that led up to the actual collapse. Well, then the real big study came out, and this is the MacDaddy of studies. This was done by NIST. Congress tasked NIST, the National Institute of Standards and Technology. They said, look, we got to know what went on here. Let's do a big study. So they did a 3-year study, a massive report, over 10,000 pages, and they had over 200 technical experts, including 85 career NIST experts studying this thing. I mean, we're talking top-of-the-line experts looking at this thing. But again, the funny part with this whole study here, you think, well, wow, with all that volume there, we're going to get a lot of information here. When all was said and done, they stopped before the collapse even began. So they stopped at what's called collapse initiation. Before there was any downward motion, they said, okay, we're done. They washed their hands of it. And they even said later on that there's little analysis of the actual collapse itself. Their conclusion was that global collapse ensued. Well, we know global collapse ensued. The question was, how did it ensue? But that was their conclusion. So all this time, we really didn't have, again, that's why we have the least amount of investigation on the actual collapse itself. Now, later on, there was what's called a request for correction that was sent to NIST, and they responded with a letter, and they wrote back. One of the excerpts of that letter was, NIST said, Quote, we are unable to provide a full explanation of the total collapse. Well, again, that's kind of odd to me, 2,000 people or more, and we don't know how that thing collapsed, and they can't provide a full explanation. So, I kind of use this through this whole video here. So again, just to summarize, no official investigation ever explained the one event that murdered the most, the collapse of the Twin Towers. Also, no official study ever said that the fall of the Twin Towers was a natural gravity collapse. Isn't that weird? If you look in their reports, maybe somebody out there knows where it is, and they can show it to me, but I can't find anything where they said the collapse process was a natural gravity collapse. We all assumed they fell naturally by gravity alone due to the fires in the airplanes, but the official reports never said it. Only the media says that. So let's take a look at this fall. Let's start with the very most basic question. How long did it take for those towers to collapse? And I'm going to focus on the North Tower. So the question is, well, what's the total collapse time? Well, if you go to the 9/11 Commission report, which was the most comprehensive report, they told us that the South Tower collapsed in 10 seconds. That was one of the sentences that had one of the two sentences. Okay, the South Tower collapsed in 10 seconds, according to the experts. Then if you go to a lot of videos, and in a lot of videos, you'll notice they've never really used the actual event. They use computer simulations. In computer simulations, you can get pigs to fly with computer simulations, okay? There can be very good ones, but you can have them do anything you want. But rarely do they use the actual event to explain what happened. So let's listen what the complete physics told us about the collapse time.
The North Tower came down in 13 seconds, and the South Tower took just 11 seconds.
Okay, so 11 and 13 seconds. That's what we're told by the experts on the complete physics. Well, what about the Smithsonian channel? That's pretty good. That's a pretty nice channel. They have a lot of good scientific things. What did they tell us? And again, you'll notice that they kind of use animations, computer animations. They never really use the real event. And this is what they told us.
The North Tower falls in 13 seconds, but with a greater number of floors above the impact site of the South Tower, it takes only 11 seconds.
Okay, so at least they're consistent. They're all 10, 11, 13 seconds. So all of the information that we were told so far was, okay, well, that's pretty consistent. That must be the fall time. Well, let's measure the actual collapse. Let's look at the actual collapse, and I've got a second timer there. Let's see how fast this thing falls. There's 11, there's 12, this is a North Tower, there's 13 seconds. Uh-oh, it's keeping going. What do we have peeking out here? Well, wait a minute, we still have a portion of the tower. And we're talking the total collapse time of the whole tower, not just the roof. Well, there's a bunch of core columns that are still standing, pretty strong structure. And then all of a sudden that stops to drop. So I get right around 30 or 32 seconds, but I rounded it to 30 seconds. That's really the total collapse time. So that's kind of odd. Why did they tell us less than 15 seconds when the total collapse time is actually closer to 30 seconds? They're trying to hide something? What's going on here? And actually, if you go in the NIST report, NIST does tell us the truth. They do say that only the 13 seconds is for when the first panels of the upper floors hit the ground. And then they have a table that says the actual collapse time, they talk about the core columns, was more like 28. And then when you include the fall of the columns, about 30 seconds is the total collapse time. Well, let's look at the collapse time. I break this down. The first thing I broke it into 4 stages. The first stage is what I call the visible roof stage. This lasts up to about 3 seconds. Depends on the tower, but let's say 3 seconds. This is the only time you can measure the rate of fall, okay? David Chandler's done it. I think Stephen Jones done it. A lot of other people have done it. They can measure the rate of acceleration. And they do it within these first few seconds because after that, you can't do it. So here it is, going straight down. We've all seen that. That's the North Tower. And that's it. So that's the first phase in the first 3 seconds of those 30 seconds. And again, that's the only time you can measure the rate of acceleration. And it turns out the rate of acceleration is not free fall acceleration. It's about 60%. Okay, it's not super important for some other reasons I'm going to show later on, actually very soon here. But it does, the key of it is that it uniformly accelerates. The second stage, well, okay, let's look at the first stage. I shouldn't have done the second stage. The first volume destroyed, and Richard Gage has a nice one where he has a couple of red lines and green lines. The first portion that was destroyed was actually the upper floors. Well, this kind of takes apart that, remember that pile driver theory where they said the top remains solid and it drove the bottom down? Well, it didn't. It can't be a pile driver theory because the first thing to be destroyed is the upper floors, and that's why we can only see it for the first 3 seconds. So the first thing destroyed is the upper floors, the small pile driver that's supposed to drive the rest of it down. The more important thing, or equally important thing, is not that it went down at free fall acceleration necessarily. Building 7 did. We know that went down at free fall acceleration for maybe 2.5 seconds, something like that. The towers didn't. But the key here is that they went down with no jolts or no impacts. Well, if there's no impacts, anytime you have a structure holding a structure on top of it, any tall structure, that in the lower structure is cold and undamaged, and it's capable of taking 3 to 5 times the weight of that. If that accelerates down, the moment it hits the lower undamaged floors below, again, let's assume that all the columns were taken out by the plane. It doesn't matter. Once it starts moving down, that structure below is cold. Remember, that's where Oriole Palmer was going up, and people were walking down those stairs. It wasn't hot. And so it wasn't melted steel. It wasn't even softened steel like a lot of them try to use. It was cold, hard steel. Well, the problem is, as soon as that starts falling down, there was no jolts measured. And again, a lot of people measured that. Tony Zambotti, Graham McQueen are famous for their paper called The Missing Jolt. It's a critical thing at the beginning of the fall. So if there's no jolt, there's no impact to magnify the force needed to destroy the structure below. If it was a gravity collapse, this is what you would see. You would see it coming down and impacting. Now, this is a controlled demolition, kind of delayed, but the point of it is you have the upper floors coming down, then impacting the bottom, and there is a definite jolt. If you do some experiments, and I've done some experiments, one was called The Force Behind the Motion, where I actually take structures and I'm looking at the motion. I'm not trying to do the exact same structure. I'm trying to mimic the motions we saw there. And there's always an impact with a top-down gravity collapse only. Now, the other thing is that we have 2 different motions here. We can see stuff going out, see those black smoke going out, and we can also see the roof dropping down. So there's 2 basic motions. There's a downward motion and there's an outward motion. And most people think, well, it went down and it pushed that stuff out. But did it? What motion came first? Did it go down and out? Well, if there was no jolts and it was smooth going down, the sequence could not have been down first and then out because there would have been a jolt. It had to have been out first and then down. And again, if we're looking at the motion, the only way possible to have the top portion smoothly accelerate down is if some other force blew out the underlying supports, allowing it to accelerate down at that 0.6 free fall of G. So the force had to be out and then down, not down and out. So without any jolts, even in this first phase, a fire-induced gravity collapse is impossible. So that may be why NIST stopped at collapse initiation and why, one of the reasons why they said we are unable to provide a full explanation of the total collapse. Let's look at the next section, what I call the lateral destruction. This is it's about 10 seconds. Notice that it's falling out. For anybody new to this subject, hopefully there's some people new to it. Notice that it's really being blown outside that footprint. And there's an awful lot of white smoke and dust coming out of that thing. It's being blown outward. I call this the lateral destruction phase because it's being blown laterally, outward, and down, both. Again, it's out and down. Well, if the mass of the upper floors is being blown outside that footprint, and you can see it right here, I don't know if you can see my cursor, but it's obviously being blown outside. All this mass here that's being blown out, well, that's not available to impact the lower undamaged structure below. At this moment in time, this structure is still solid. It's not hot. Well, all this upper mass is gone. And much of it, I don't know the percentage, but a significant portion is being blown out. So that means that this underlying structure that's designed to carry the full load, and by the way, full hurricane loads and full live loads, full dead loads, this is designed to take all that. That means the moment this thing started coming down and the material was being blown out, that means the load on this structure below is getting less and less. It's not getting more and more weight. Okay, so it's actually decreasing. So that's contrary to the whole idea of a pile driver or a pancake because the mass isn't there. It's being blown outside. It's going out and down. So everything is being, not everything, it's being pulverized. And again, you can see where the original footprint is here. Well, look at the size of this thing. It's being blown out. By the way, there's our building, our favorite building 7 that went down to free fall. It's being blown out. Everything here is being pulverized. And all the concrete floors is over 100-acre concrete floors. Everything, and sadly, everyone is being pulverized that's in there. Just about everyone. There was a few remaining people that survived in stairwell B, but the vast majority of people that were found, they weren't crushed between floors. There wasn't any saving people between floors because there were no floors. Those people were exploded. They found over 21,000 parts of people to try to take the DNA for. Over 1,000 people they never identified. The family didn't have one chip of a bone to bury. They never identified over 1,000 people. So what can cause what we see here? Well, I'm saying explosives. Notice that the material is being blown out. Something is pushing that out, and it's pushing it out in rapid sequence. What can do that? Well, high explosives can do that. Do I know exactly what kind of explosives? No, but I know explosives can blow things up, and that explains, if that explains what weakened the floors below, allowed the roof to uniformly accelerate, it explains why the material is being blown out, and it explains why there aren't pancake floors, and it also explains why some people in that stairwell B, I know people like to point out that they came out and looked at the sky. Well, yeah, sure they did, because everything above was being blown out away into a huge radius field. Okay, the next phase, the third phase, after everything's blown out, we still have those standing core columns. These things stand. This is an independent structure. This thing can stand. It's a strong structure. It's not the entire core columns. It's a portion of the core columns, and you can go into the design and find out exactly which columns they are. I think Jerry B is very good at that. He has all the design plans. He knows what those are. I don't know exactly what they are. I haven't studied that much, but the bottom line is that they exist. And so this thing stands in the third phase. This is the phase. This phase here and the next phase are the two phases that they don't want the people to know about. That's why, that's my conjecture is that's why they stop at 13 or 11 or 15 seconds. That's only the time, again, for the upper material and the roof to hit the ground. They don't want you to know about this because this, in my opinion, the spire, it's like the missing jolt. This is the tail end of it, completely devastates any story.
There goes the second tower. Unfucking believable.
So there it stood. It stood for 14 seconds. That is a networked, it's all latticed together. Notice how that thing is nice and straight. Nice and straight. It's not bent. It's not kinked. Well, that's weird. All these are kind of cut off and they're straight. The other thing to notice is, look at these steel columns. They cut over like a tree. They fall like a tree in the beginning. You see that right in the beginning there? And this thing still stands afterward. But this cuts like a tree. It falls like a tree. I've dropped a lot of trees in my life, by the way. I used to be a woodsman, but something cut this thing. Notice all the white smoke about it. What cut that? Well, we know that office fires can't cut steel, okay? It wasn't gravity that can cut a steel column, and it wasn't Osama bin Laden or 19 hijackers. They're long gone, so they didn't have anything to do with this thing. What cut that steel here? That's the question. And again, this long, tall columns, look how strong and straight they are. You can see portions of floor trusses that came off of this thing, and they're stripped away. They're blown away from it, but we still have a nice straight column. And this column it's called an unbraced column. It's just held by the bottom. It's not held by the top, which means the capacity of that column is much, much less during the collapse process than its actual design strength. So it's very weak. It's a weak column just being supported like that. Well, we know the obvious. If you take a plate and drop it through a toothpick, if you want that toothpick not to be bent or broken, something's got to happen to that plate, right? That plate's either got to be blown out, blown up, or blown away, or moved away so it doesn't hit the toothpick. Pretty obvious. Well, the same thing we can say with this tall column. This tall column wasn't bent, it wasn't buckled, it wasn't kinked. Look at those columns there. And yet, the roof is already down. Obviously, the roof did not fall through that, and obviously, the upper block of floors, the pile driver theory, did not go through that because they're already down. So something happened to the upper floors, and the answer is they were blown out. Remember we said the motions was out and then down? That's because the upper floors were blown out and away from the footprint, which explains again why there's no pancake floors, why there's no roof, why there's no nothing. Because that's the only way you can get through that thing. And again, they don't want the average person to see this, because this to me is almost a no-brainer. It's like, well, yeah, you can't have the roof fall through that. So the mere fact of what I call the spire, and other people do too, it's those inner core columns that stood, not the antenna from Tower 1. All gravity collapse theories that have been proposed are absolutely impossible because nothing can fall through that spire. Okay, the ASCE report, that gets stuck on it. The crush down, crush up, that gets stuck on it. The NIST report, the pancake theory, and of course the 9/11 Commission report, which only had one sentence on the North Tower. Well, that gets stuck on it. Nothing gets through that thing. Everything gets impaled, as I say, by that spire. And of course, that may be another reason why NIST said we are unable to provide a full explanation of the total collapse. The final phase is phase 4. I call it stage 4. It's the falling core phase. It only lasts about 3 seconds. Now, later on, I'm going to be talking about Dr. Wood. She says that got dustified. I'm saying it fell. And I'm going to show you why, because we have photographs and videos of it falling. If we look at a different video of it, this is an excerpt from a demolition video. It talks about how to make a structure walk, and it's relatively short.
Job of the shape charge is to cut steel H-beams.
The way we do this is by cutting the beam at an angle, which through a series of beams cut at the same angle will tend to make the building shift over and walk.
Okay, so let's take a look at this thing. Look at the structure. You can look at the front buildings. They're not moving. Look at it go sideways. It's going sideways and then down. Sideways and then down. It's walking. So this was the tower's last walk. Okay, but it went down, and no gravity collapse theory can explain that, the fall of that spire. And so it's my conjecture that was brought down by more cutter charges that were on those center core columns that finally brought it down. There was a wind that day, I think from the north, about 9 or 10 miles an hour, kind of hit it. It blew the smoke away, so we could observe that. We have that. This is the 4th phase. That nobody wants you to see this. So the 3rd and the 4th phase, in my opinion, is what they've been trying to hide for many, many years. It's been in front of our face the whole time. So in my opinion, explosives took down those towers. And that was known the very first day. I remember, like I said, when I watched it and everybody was saying, yeah, there's explosives there. Well, even the media knew it. The media knew that explosives took those things down, which matches all the motions that we just observed.
It happened the same way. The explosion started high in the building and worked its way down. There you see the building imploding. Do you see what's happening? I think we're safe here. I think I'm on safe ground, Bill. I don't think this was clearly the way the structure is collapsing. This was the result of something that was planned. It's not accidental that the first tower just happened to collapse and then the second tower just happened to collapse in exactly the same way. How they accomplished this, we don't know. But clearly this is what they wanted to accomplish.
I agree with them. How they accomplished this, I'm not 100% sure, but they definitely used explosives in my opinion. So what are the takeaways from my little video the last 30 seconds? Well, one, no official study ever explained the 30-second collapse of the Twin Towers, which murdered the most. They never explained it. No official study, the official studies, ever said that the towers collapsed by gravity alone. Again, if somebody can find that for me, let me know, but I couldn't find it. All gravity collapses are impossible. Nothing's going to get through that spire, and a bunch of other reasons, the missing jolt, all kinds of other reasons. The only thing that makes any sense at all for the Twin Towers and World Trade Center 7 were that they were brought down with explosives. So that's sort of the takeaways from my older video, the year-old video. I'm going to go into the next portion of it, which is also ties to the Twin Towers. And that was this year's video that I put together. And this is the video I did is called Where the Towers Went. And it's actually a book review. It's a book review. Dr. Judy Wood, I'm sure all you know are very familiar with her. She's been involved in the truth movement, and she has a different hypothesis as far as what happened there. So my video, Where the Towers Went, is kind of a book review of her book, which asks the question, where did the towers go? And so what I do is I take excerpts from the book and I try to show from my perspective what I think happened, and where she may not be correct as far as my opinion. Well, the first thing is she does agree, and she does spend quite a bit of the first part of her book saying that it wasn't a pancake collapse. And she has different graphs and reasons why. And she calls it free fall speed, free fall acceleration, doesn't matter. And I think this was done sort of in the early years. I think this was published in 2010, I think. So I'll say first up front is that I agree with her. It wasn't a pancake collapse. And that's what I kind of hit on the last 30 seconds. So I completely agree with Dr. Wood that couldn't agree more. I don't believe the official story doesn't even exist because they didn't say it was a pancake collapse, but the media told us. So I agree with her on this. But then we start to diverge because she also does not believe in her book, and I'm going to go through some of these things. She does not believe airplanes hit the towers, and I'm sure some of you on the call here also don't believe airplanes hit the towers. I'll tell you up front, I do, but that's okay. I'll show you why, but I think that. She thinks that the thermitic material found at ground zero formed naturally. As you well know, Stephen Jones and nanothermite was found there. She does not believe there were any explosions. She does not believe there were any incendiaries. She also doesn't believe there was any high heat, and she doesn't believe there was much smoke. She thinks the steel is what she calls dustified, and she thinks there's very, very little steel at ground zero. And she looks at the towers and she sees that there's no pancake floors there, and she says, well, where'd they go? They're not there. And of course, my answer is they're there. They were just blown way outside the footprint. But let's get into some of these things. So her book does show many, many pictures, okay, of the event. They're nice pictures too, by the way. They're high quality. It's a high quality book as far as the quality of the material put together. She does not show any pictures of the airplane impacts. That's the only thing that she doesn't show. And then again, rather than the plane, she tries to explain the evidence without using the plane, without using explosions, without using high temperatures, and without using smoke. Well, how do you explain that if you don't use those things there? Well, she suggests, she has photographs. She's suggesting that the things that we're seeing there wasn't from heat and high temperature explosions, but they were actually from basically one of three sources, either directed energy weapons, where you'll hear me use the word DEWs. I'm sure you're all familiar with that. And there are a few directed energy weapons right now. I think the USS Preble has a single laser that they use to take some things shoot in the sky. She also refers to what's called the Hutchinson effects, and that was a gentleman in Canada, John Hutchinson, and he has some videos showing different things bending and floating in air and things like that. I don't know if all that's been proven or not. I think there's some serious questions on that, but she ties to that a lot. And she uses cold fusion, and fusion, as I understand it, is something that happens at room temperature. I don't think it's been proven yet. I know it was discussed, but in the 90s, I'm pretty sure it doesn't really exist yet, but I'm just going to take her for face value on these things. And she says that actually 9/11 was a demonstration of free energy. Her book says, the cover of her book says, evidence of directed free energy technology on 9/11. Okay, it's about free energy. She says 9/11 was a demonstration of the world of a new technology known as free energy. Let's talk about the no planes. She claims that the impact, when she first looked at that, she watched it live too, and she started almost chuckling because she said, well, there's no way that can happen. And this is a copy of her book. She thinks it looks like a Roadrunner cartoon where the Roadrunner goes through and punches out a hole there. She says the aluminum can't cut the steel columns. She says the hole's too small and there were no plane parts found. And this always starts stirring folks up here, whether the planes hit the towers or not. Well, let's take a look at some things here. First of all, there were lots of plane parts found. These are just some of the larger ones that were found at ground zero, but there's also like shrapnel all over the sidewalks there that were found. There's quite a bit of evidence of lots of pieces of plane that were found there. So when she says there were no plane parts found, I guess she'd have to explain, well, these were found. Were these all staged and snuck in there and the moment after the plane hit? I guess that's a question for her. But she says there were no plane parts. I think there's ample evidence for quite a few plane parts around ground zero. She's right about one thing, and other people are right too, that the plane doesn't completely fit through the tower wall. Okay, the majority of it does, but the wing tips do not go and cut all the way through. What you're looking at there is the aluminum cladding on the outside. And then you can see those outer segments were hoisted up there, and they're actually bolted into place there. There's a bolt placement there. And this was actually ripped out. A lot of the bolts got ripped out. A few columns were cut, but a lot of them were just broken segments that with the impact that broke that out. But the plane technically, she's right, won't fit in there. This is just the outer cladding here that got impacted. And you see some cuts in here, but see, it didn't cut this box column at all. These are 14 by 14 box columns with a windows inside it. So that's kind of interesting. What could make this? Why didn't it go through here, number one? And how come it's just on the outside? If there were explosives on the inside, well, what'd they do? Sneak on the outside and plant explosives there? I don't think so. So this column is solid. I don't know how explosives could take it out in the shape of a plane, but I know some people think that. So I'm going to give her credit for that. And other people, yeah, the plane doesn't exactly fit. It's the same argument at the Pentagon. I'm going to bring in the Pentagon in Shanksville just as a tangential, just to kind of get some fires lit out there. When you look at the whole of the Pentagon, it's technically, if you look at the whole thing, a composite picture, it's about 100 feet wide at the bottom. Now, the first early ones only show there was some spray going across here, and they just showed an 18-foot diameter. But the truth of the matter is the hole is really about 96 to 100 feet wide here, where the columns are broken. But a 757 is 125 feet. So you could make the argument that, well, I guess it's only a 100-foot wide hole, and only this outer part here was impacted, but it really didn't break some of these outer columns here. Yeah, you could say that, in my opinion. But the majority of the hole is there on the Pentagon. So the first question is, can aluminum blow through the steel perimeter columns? Okay, because we see some broken columns here. Again, a lot of the segments were bolted and broken out. Yeah, there's some broken ones here, but again, nothing near the top here. Is that even possible? Well, the question is really, can a soft material go through a hard material? And the answer is, it depends. It depends. It depends on the velocity. Okay, the energy goes up, and I'm not going to throw much math at you, but the energy goes up with what we call the square of the velocity. So if you double the velocity, you make the energy go up by 4 times. If you triple or quadruple the velocity, okay, it goes up 9 to 16 to 25 times the energy. So the answer to, can a soft material go through a hard material? It depends. So here's a ping pong ball. Normally you have a ping pong battle, you hit the ball and it's no big deal, right? It's not going to go through it. But if you accelerate that little plastic ball, well, the answer is it can go right through a wooden paddle, which obviously is harder. Okay, so here's the lead bullet. Well, can lead go through steel? Well, the answer is no. At low velocity, obviously it can't go through steel. But at high velocity, same question. Can a lead bullet go through steel? You darn right it can. That's me. I'm shooting. I think it's a 7mm Remington mag I use right there on that one. But punch right through, no problem. I routinely punch right through steel plates. Now, this is copper and lead, easily punching through 1/4-inch steel, and I can actually go with heavier steel, but that's what I happen to have there. So the answer to the question, can a soft material go through a hard material? It depends. It depends on the velocity. Also, a single individual mass may not be able to penetrate something. Okay, if you take a single mass and throw it at something, even at a high velocity, it may not go all the way through. Okay, but multiple quantities of the same mass at the same velocity will start pecking through that thing. It's almost like a jackhammer. Okay, so think of the body of a plane. That's where the most mass is. The wingtips don't have much. The body of the plane obviously has the seats, the front wheels, the luggage compartment. It has a much higher mass than the wingtips, even though the wingtips and the body are both going the same velocity. So when you see a plane crash, if it's a low velocity crash, which most plane crashes are, I'm a novice pilot, not a very good one, but when you're taught to bring that thing in, you try to land that thing, and a lot of the plane crashes are relatively slow, maybe 100, 150 miles an hour. When you see those plane crashes, what do you see? Oh, you see big sections. People survive. You see the tail. You see a wing. When you see a high velocity impact, high velocity, it changes everything. It actually shreds. I'm not going to use the word vaporizes, but it shreds the plane into thousands of small particles. If you take something and you impact it into, say, There's videos on a huge concrete block. That plane, there ain't much left of it. It just vaporizes. But even when it hits something, those particles are still moving. It has what's called momentum, or just think about it, it's just velocity. It's still moving. The center particles of that center body, they're still moving as they're, I'm going to call it jackhammering, as they keep going through, and they will penetrate deeper than the particles on the outside that are going, the fewer particles that are going the exact same velocity, but they won't, but the inner ones will. Let me give you an example of that. I dragged out one of my shotguns the other day, and I just lined it up, okay? And I'm sure have shot a shotgun. Well, when you shoot a shotgun, what do you have? Well, the center part where the most mass is there, where the most pellets are, they go through. There we got blue sky. Look at this pellet up here. That didn't go through. This pellet and these pellets were going the exact same velocity. But this went through and this didn't. So you got to be kind of, when you ask the question, it's going to go through. Well, it depends. Now imagine the pellets were a heavier mass here and a lighter mass out here where the wingtips were. Well, it'd be even worse. These would not go through, but the center portion would, because it has that momentum from all those particles. So a high velocity with a mass at the center explains, one, how an aluminum plane can punch through the steel columns, especially when a lot of them were bolted. They were bolted there, but there was some cut. It also explains why the hole is technically smaller than the plane, because the wingtips have much less mass, even though they're going through the same velocity. So those wingtips are slapping the outside, they're breaking the aluminum, but they're not cutting through. No doubt about it, they're not cutting through the towers. That's true of Tower 1. It's true for Tower 2. When you zoom in there, yeah, okay, it didn't go through there either. Oh, the plane won't fit. Yeah, of course it won't fit, because there's less mass on the wingtips. It's also true for Shanksville in a way, okay? I'm not an expert on Shanksville, but my understanding is that plane entered at very high speed. It wasn't a low plane crash, so you're not going to see the tail and the wings. It went down at very high speed. It went down at a very steep angle, something like 45 degrees, and it went plowing into there. I think it actually rotated and went upside. It plowed into the dirt. Okay, so what are you going to see when you have a moon crater from meteor impact? You're going to see that dirt blowing up. You're going to see a crater building up around the edges where there's enough mass. Okay, but you might not see it where the wings are. So what do we see here in the vertical direction? We see this bowed up here. We see kind of a crater. That's because, like that shotgun shell, it bored in there and it blew everything up. And by the way, it spread a bunch of fragments. I don't know if that's my phone or what making that noise. It makes a bunch of fragments and it blew over, I don't know, 50 acres of stuff. So that's why there's so many small fragments of an airplane, because it was at high velocity, a lot of mass in the middle, and that's what made the vertical on that. Looks like a moon crater, like a meteor impact. What about the Pentagon? This will get some people some feathers ruffled. What about the Pentagon? Okay. Well, when you look at the Pentagon, when you look at what's called a C-ring hole, it's like, well, wait, how come the whole plane didn't go through there? Well, again, the answer is that's the entire body of the plane. That's where the majority of the mass is. So the C-ring hole, we see all these plane parts and shredded aluminum. Okay. All of this had enough mass. There's the front wheel, and there's actually another wheel hub in there. It also has all the DNA from the Flight 77 passengers. If you look at the DNA information on that, everything's in the center there. All that mass, the majority of the mass, had enough energy to blow through the outside and then all the way through. There weren't segmented walls, by the way, that was up above, but it had enough to blow through the outside wall and still enough momentum to blow through the C-ring hole. And interestingly enough, this angle, I've measured this angle here relative to the wall here is at the exact same angle as the flight path and all the debris. The flight path with the poles, the generator, the two trees, the low wall, everything lines up perfectly with that mass coming in and hitting that thing. So again, I'm just looking at it from a momentum and from where all the particles are. But again, they get shredded, no doubt about it, at high velocity. And it's also true for what's called the USS Hinsdale. The USS Hinsdale was a troop transport ship. Okay, it served in Iwo Jima, and then it was in Okinawa, and this is in the spring of '45. Okinawa, it got hit by a kamikaze. Okay, Japan was losing the war. They were going to desperate measures. You do what you got to do in desperate measures, and they flew think it was actually called a Kawasaki plane, but they flew a plane into the side of the hull of a steel ship. Now, we don't have any video of that, but we look at the evidence there. It's like, how can an aluminum plane go through a steel ship? Well, the answer is the velocity was high enough. Okay, well, why didn't it cut out where the wingtips were? Well, the answer is because the wingtips have less mass. And so it made a scar there, but it didn't go through because even though the velocity was the same, the mass was less. Look where the mass was. It punched right through that steel. And by the way, those kamikazes, they would do dive bombs and they would come in very close to the ground, and no, they didn't fall apart. No, there wasn't any ground effect. They were ripping those planes in there as fast as they could go. And the planes didn't fall apart and all that. So that's kind of, in my opinion, a false argument. The planes can go very, very fast at close to the ground. So the point of this is, just because the hole is too small and the parts are shredded doesn't mean the plane didn't hit the Twin Towers or Shanksville or the Pentagon or the USS Hinsdale, even though I don't have a video of it. There's some pretty good evidence, and there was a lot of people that says, yeah, it was a kamikaze. It makes sense. It was in Okinawa. All right, but Dr. Wood says there was no planes, and I know other people probably in the call said, no, there was no planes. Instead, she says, she uses the term when the tower got its hole. She does a comparative analysis. She finds some magnetometer readings up in Alaska, and she noticed there were some anomalies at about the same time as the towers got their hole. So she ties it to some disturbance of magnetic force in the Earth's magnetic force fields. That's her story. To me, it seems like a plane makes more sense, but she's saying, no, there's something happened there. And that's, she doesn't think any planes hit it. Okay. All right. So, and I know this has been brought up before, if the planes didn't hit the towers, why did the towers sway almost immediately after they got its hole? Okay. People have studied this. The towers do sway. The plane impacts, there's a little crushing there, and there's probably a little bit of a delay before that momentum is transferred, and then the towers swayed. What made the towers sway if it wasn't an airplane? That's showing some paper, which I put in the wrong slide here. All right, the other thing about nanothermite. Nanothermite was found in all the dust. All of you are familiar with a nanothermite found. A red-gray chip, has a matrix specialty. She does not believe, she thinks that whatever thermitic material was found at ground zero, it formed naturally. She says the Twin Towers were steel structures with aluminum cladding, so it's natural to be expected that materials that the buildings were made of would be found in the nanodust of their remains. So she's saying that it formed naturally. There's a problem with that, and that's called the law of entropy. In order to make those red-gray chips, or to put them in just the right proportion, it takes work to do that. And so the natural formation of nanothermite or thermite in the right proper order defies physical laws. So I'm not sure how she explains how nanothermite, which is a scientifically engineered product, can be made naturally. So I have personally a problem with that concept. She also says that there is no proof of concept for the thermite hypothesis. She says, there's a quote here, there's no proof of concept for the thermite hypothesis. In the case of thermite WTC tower, such a proof of concept has never been laid out. She wrote this book in 2010. I did that video called The Great Thermate Debate also in 2010. She may not have been aware of this, but I tried to show a proof of concept.
Can thermite of any type burn through steel beams?
So the idea was that, yes, thermite can melt steel beams. It can cut steel beams. And I did. You have to watch A Great Thermate Debate to show what it can and can't do. And I was using very crude homemade thermite. It wasn't the good stuff, the nanothermite. It was very crude. The other thing they found in the dust, I'm sure all you have heard of, is iron microspheres. A lot of them. Here I am holding some iron microspheres from a thermate experience. Iron microspheres, first of all, two questions. A, why are they round? Well, they're round because they get extremely hot, enough to make it molten, and surface tension pulls it into a sphere. B, why is it iron and not steel? Well, because iron is a natural byproduct of a thermitic reaction. It naturally forms as a byproduct. So if there was nanothermite in there, there sure could be iron microspheres. So that thermate that I was using to cut that beam there, you can see some molten steel and or iron coming down here. And all those sparks coming out there, they're pretty hot. Let me tell you, I almost got burned almost got my tail burned a few times, but they hit the ground and then they do start cooling off. But it does form iron microspheres. I tested it. Sure enough, we have iron microspheres. But Dr. Wood doesn't think there was iron microspheres because she doesn't think there was any high heat and she doesn't think there was any thermite and any explosions. Instead, she comes up with another hypothesis. She throws out that maybe the iron microspheres came from whatever force makes crop circles. Okay, so whatever that force was, she kind of ties it to, and she does say that she understands that crop circles weren't around the Twin Towers, but she's saying whatever force makes crop circles, they found some iron microspheres in the dust. And I don't know what force makes crop circles. I do know they can be made by hand. I know two gentlemen actually made 200 of them, and I don't think they made iron microspheres. She ties it to what's called the Tunguska event. That was in Russia. That was in 1908. That was a massive explosion, and it was in Siberia. It was in the boondocks of Russia. It was massive, and it blew down, I don't know how many million board feet of trees that it blew down. And most people think that it was a meteor that hit that thing with a major impact, and you can still see evidence of it today. Almost everybody says it's a meteor, but she says that although various theories about the cause have been proposed, including Tesla's Wardenclyffe Tower, that was built, by the way, in Long Island, a meteorite, an antimatter weapons test, none have been conclusive. I don't know of anybody who ever said an antimatter weapon was there used in Tunguska in 1908 when they were using horse cavalry, when 3 months before Henry Ford came out with his first Model T. I had a Model A, it's a newer, Model T is even older. I don't think they had an antimatter weapon. I don't even know exactly what an antimatter weapon test is, but for me, it's kind of far-fetched to think that whatever that force was that did that also made the iron microspheres in the dust. It's just me. Okay, I call it the eutectic steel. A lot of you are familiar with this. This is in the Appendix C of FEMA. Remember I talked about that FEMA ASCE report? One of the telling things in there that was found by, I think it was Professor Biederman and Sisson, it was that they found some very unusual steel that came from Building 7. And she claims that that is just an extraordinary deterioration that can best be described as molecular dissociation. She doesn't think it happened by high heat. She doesn't think thermite did that. She thinks it was some either directed energy weapon or some other thing that did that, and it caused molecular dissociation. Well, I've also looked at that, and I've also done an experiment on that. And the question is, can thermite also do the same thing? Can thermate, which is thermite with sulfur, by the way, can that also make holes, and can it make thin steel? Well, I did an experiment. And here is less than 4 pounds of thermate focused on the web of a wide flange. The web was reduced in thickness with gaping holes, thin to almost razor sharpness, with a Swiss cheese appearance. So it looks like thermate can also do that, but she dismisses all that. She also dismisses all controlled demolition theories. She equates a controlled demolition as where the entire mass of the Twin Towers hits the ground or a building all at the same time. So she says here, a controlled demolition where a building is knocked off its supports and thereafter slams to the ground. In short, the bathtub evidence, that's the perimeter wall that was built around the Twin Towers. The bathtub evidence is powerful testimony that the official story of the Twin Towers pancaking down and slamming into the bathtub is precisely that, a story that fails to fit the evidence. Then she says, this means logically that controlled demolition model cannot be true either. Again, because she's thinking the whole tower hits all at once. But that's not how controlled demolitions work. It's taken down over time. It's not one big solid impact. And as we saw in the other video, it took 30 seconds. It wasn't an instantaneous impact. It took 30 seconds for all that stuff to come down, which means, yeah, you have seismic impacts, but they're much, much smaller because you have smaller masses hitting it. So to automatically dismiss all controlled demolitions by saying it had to hit all at once, to me is not true. Now I look at what I call the source of the force. We looked about in the last 30 seconds, we noticed that everything was being blown out. And this is the picture on her cover of her book. It's a great picture. Again, that's being blown out and away. So that means anytime you try to move an object, you need to have a net force behind that object in order to move it, to accelerate it. Well, the net force is always in direction of the observed acceleration. So the motion is being blown out, something pushed it out there. So the net force had to have come from inside the towers. Okay, and again, we've already looked, I don't know, I can't remember if we showed this or not, I think we did. That net force had to be from inside the towers, not the outside. So the question is, were directed energy weapons snuck into the towers and placed at every floor? Okay, wouldn't it be much easier during the other elevator upgrades and some of the floor upgrades just to use explosives? But she's saying no, it was some sort of directed energy weapon that was used to blow this out. Again, common physics here, it has to be the force, whatever the force is, had to be from inside the towers. Remember those firefighters talking about explosions?
As we were getting our gear on and making our way to the stairway, there was a heavy-duty explosion.
The whole building just collapsed on us inside the lobby.
Was that a secondary explosion?
Yes, it was.
That was the
Yeah, definitely secondary explosion.
Okay, so they said they heard explosions. We heard in the beginning, lots of people heard explosions. She does not think those explosions came from explosives. She says there were no explosives. She says that everything that go boom is not necessarily a bomb. Consider what happens to a raw egg when cooked in a microwave oven. This leads us to the testimony of exploding Scott packs. Scott packs, portable air tanks for firemen, frequently exploded for no visible reason. So she's inferring that those firemen were listening to Scott packs being blown up and not really explosives. That's her story. She also has a whole chapter called The Jumpers. And that was the sad part about before the towers came down with all the smoke there, we saw a lot of people that jumped from those towers. She doesn't think they were either pushed out or they went because of the smoke. She thinks that there was some sort of energy field that propelled them out. She says, consider what might be expected if some sort of energy field, such as a microwave field, has been affecting that area just inside the building. She says this implies an energized launch by all the jumpers unless wind currents immediately pulled them away from the building. So she's saying a force, an electromagnetic force, I'm not magnetic, but she's saying that pushed them out rather than some other reason why they were forced to jump. It's an extraordinary claim. I think it requires some extraordinary evidence to see that one. She talks about rolled up carpets. She makes new words up, which are fine. That's okay. I do that sometimes. And she noticed a lot of the beans that looked like poured cake batter. She calls this limp lasagna noodle. She says, again, if you take away heat, well, how would that form without heat? I think there was heat. She says, what type of energy field could develop the extreme type of verticular bending and damage in those photos? The Tesla-Hutchinson effect, change in the molecular structure in one area of the material can produce anomalous bending in this kind shown. So she thinks it's the Tesla-Hutchinson effect. I think high heat could do that. So can thermite make high heat? Yeah, you better believe it can make high heat. Okay, smoke. I thought there was a lot of smoke there, but she doesn't think there was a lot of smoke there. She called it lather. She saw all that white puffy stuff on the side of those buildings. And she says, careful analysis of the photograph shows evidence of what I call lathering up of the buildings of the WTC just prior to their going poof. She calls it going poof because she thinks they disappeared. WTC1 lathered up just as WTC2 went poof and continued lathering after the destruction of WTC1. So I think it's smoke. She calls it lather. The big thing is dustification. She thinks that the steel turned to dust as they were falling. Okay, here's a close-up of some steel falling. She's saying that's all turning to dust. And this is just a little excerpt from what she's saying.
It turns to dust.
I don't think it's turning to dust. I don't think it's turning to dust as it falls. I think it's rotating. And in the video, I don't have it in this one here. Watch the video. I have other videos. It shows it rotating as it falls, but it's there. It doesn't turn to dust, especially with no heat. It doesn't turn to iron microspheres. She doesn't think there's any iron microspheres. She thinks it turns to dust. The other thing she looks at is, remember my spire? My spire, as if I own it. She claims that turned to dust because in that video, yeah, kind of looks like it is. But is it? If you look at the other video, here it is again. Here it's walking sideways and it's falling down. Now, it could be falling through. Remember those cutter charges I talked about? All those cutter charges going off? It could be falling through its own smoke. And so I did a little homemade experiment. I call it the smoking stick. I just heated the end of that thing, but as that thing falls, the stick falls, but the smoke doesn't. So the smoke eclipses the stick. That's what I think has happened to that fire. I don't think it's turning to dust, especially since the fact there's no iron dust, no steel dust was found at ground zero. Microspheres, yes, but not angular steel dust. There's no evidence of it. She also says there was no steam. There was no hot ground zero. Because she immediately dismisses ground zero, it can't be hot. I call it a false premise. But if she starts with that, then she says there can't be any steam at ground zero. She calls what she observes fumes. The WTC site fumed for months and even years. She looked at the site and she says here, conventional smoke does not continue emerging from saturated soil for months. I agree with her. It doesn't, but it's not a conventional fire. Okay, that's because it wasn't conventional. Thermite will burn underwater. Thermite will burn underwater. So they can be hosing this down and that thermite will keep burning and it's well insulated. That can be very hot for a long time. I burned lots of big brush piles, even stump fires. I've had smolder 3 months after I got it done, when that's just with stumps and wood. So thermite can smolder. That's what could create heat even underwater. She also claims that it can't be hot because trucks and equipment use hydraulics. And hydraulics, if it had anything hot, anything over 180 degrees, would immediately seize up those hydraulics. Well, now she's getting into my realm because I have a lot of equipment and I know a little bit about equipment. So she says another indication of there being no high heat is that the truck bed being raised up by hydraulics. As discussed in chapter 13, Weird Fires, hydraulic fluid temperatures above 82, which is 180, will permanently damage hydraulic equipment. These fumes lacking heat must be composed of a gas and or fine particulate that is not hot. She says that's impossible to have anything hot there because this big hydraulic piston, that telescoping piston, that would have seized up. That's a good theory, except for I do a lot of asphalt road. I used to work on an asphalt crew. We haul that asphalt, that's over 300 degrees. Guess what? It's got a telescoping piston, raises that dump body up and it dumps it into the paver. Look at all the hydraulics on the paver. This is 300 degrees, a lot more than 180. Seems fine. It never really hurt the hydraulics. There's also a picture of what they call the grapple. I call it the grapple. Some people call it the crab claw, I think. And she says that can't be hot metal there, okay? She says if there had been any molten steel in the rubble, it would have permanently damaged any excavation equipment. At a minimum, the hydraulics would immediately fail and its moving parts would bond together or seize up. Well, here's a little, that's my sister's excavator. I was just playing with it. It's got a thumb on it. It doesn't immediately seize up, no problem at all. I play around with fires and loaders all the time. My equipment doesn't seize up. But the reason it doesn't seize up is because it takes time to transfer heat through steel, which is why you can use spaghetti tongs and you don't have your hand like boiling water. She also says there's no molten steel.
You'd get down below and you'd see molten steel running down the channel reels. Like you're in a foundry.
Yeah. Like lava.
Like lava.
Okay.
So there's a lot of evidence of molten steel, but she doesn't believe there's any molten steel. Instead, she doesn't want to insult the fireman. She says, please no way I'm insulting or implying that the fireman was lying about the molten metal. On the other hand, memories are not like tape recorders, and there's no question that memories can be manipulated. False memory syndrome refers to the creation of memories that are not based on factual events. So evidently, those firemen and all the other testimony probably were afflicted with false memory syndrome. I have a hard time. It seems like an outstanding or an incredible, extraordinary claim that they all were afflicted by that. She likes to talk about toasted cars. There's a whole chapter on it. She looks at the toasted cars and she's wondered, wow, why is it toasted here but not over here? Well, if you have some firemen who put out fires on just ordinary car fires, you will see that. You'll see some odd burn patterns. Here, it's fine back here. This car is beautiful back here. It's all waxed up, beautiful, but it's burned up in here. Talk to the firefighters about that, but I'm pretty sure you can go on the internet and find lots of pictures of toasted cars. And let me ask you a question. What would happen if you parked your car under one of my experiments? Those iron microspheres are going to hit the paint on your car. It's going to toast them, but they're going to get cool relatively quick, but it is going to do some damage and it's going to toast them. There's also lots of paper. She asked, why is only paper surviving, not the office furniture and office equipment? Well, they are office files. I mean, they're all office buildings. There should be a lot of paper. Some probably burned, and a lot of it did flutter down. Imagine if you had a feather pillow, okay, and you took your shotgun out in your backyard, you put some beer cans around it, and you shot it with your 12 gauge. What do you think would happen to the feathers? The beer cans would be kind of ripped apart, but the feathers, they would just flutter up. I should have done an experiment. I didn't want to ruin a nice feather pillow, but I'm pretty sure I'm right on this. The feathers are going to just go up, but the beer cans themselves are going to be destroyed from the impact. Well, the same thing happened with the towers. Here's that impact. Some people don't believe a plane hit it. What do we notice in addition to the towers swaying? The other thing we notice is that here comes a lot of paper. Look at all that paper. Lots of paper. It's like it's snowing. And so this is just what I call the plane impact with all this paper coming down. Why didn't the paper burn? Well, probably some of it did, but most of it didn't. And so it fluttered down, okay? It has a lot of air resistance. It goes down slower, but eventually it'll settle down, maybe after some of ground zero cools out. So I would expect a lot of paper, especially during the explosion process where you have hundreds of floors of file cabinets full of paper. I would expect an awful lot of paper. She says there's no steel at ground zero. Impossible as it may seem, she says, most of the steel from those towers also vanished, literally turning into dust. From day one of clearing ground zero around the clock, photos of demolition were taken. Did you see any photos of the 3,000 truckloads of steel being driven away? Neither did I, she said. Well, if you do a little research, here's ground zero. I think this is at day one or day two. It looks like a lot of steel there to me. Why didn't all that get dustified? There's a lot of steel there. There's also truckloads, semis truckloads, with those big excavators load them truck after truck after truck full of steel. Why didn't all those? This is evidence of steel being removed from ground zero, more and more steel. She said there wasn't any. Here's plenty of steel from an aerial. Look at all this steel. It's all cut up into segments. Okay, why didn't all this steel get dustified? And it blew it out in a huge radius up to 600 feet away. How come this didn't get dustified, but only the ones that were falling did? Okay, also notice that these are all cut to length. Well, did directed energy weapons cut those things and make it do that? Or does it make more sense that there was cutter charges used? She also said the dust clouds that rolled out were cold. She says during the destruction, there was an absence of high heat. Witnesses reported that the initial dust cloud felt cooler than the ambient temperatures. She said nobody reported having been burned by the dust cloud. I'm gonna try to roll it along here. Except these folks were there. They talked about how it got real hot wave of heat through me. Hot stuff went down my back. It was hot, wind, debris, heat, huge blast of wind, super hot wind. You just felt the heat. Our eyebrows were all singed and everything. So there is a lot of evidence of those dust clouds having high heat, contrary to what she's claiming. So where did those directed energy weapons get their energy? She claims, she doesn't make a hard claim, but she infers that it came from Hurricane Aaron. Hurricane Aaron, by the way, we just had another Hurricane Aaron this year. This is the first Hurricane Aaron. She claims that it was powered by them. She says, now let's look at the curious resemblance of a hurricane to a well-known technological invention, the Tesla coil. She wonders if Aaron was somehow steered because it was kind of going toward New York and then it turned almost 90 degrees. Aaron was somehow steered away from New York City. Aaron did not gradually turn northward to actually reverse directions. There happened to be a huge cold front coming through that day, by the way, blowing this way, but forgetting that. Let's take a look at other hurricanes. Lots of hurricanes do that. Okay, they have some weird tracking patterns. This is Melissa, which is going on right now off our coast. Here's the track of it going here. Oh, made a 90 over here. Oh, now it reversed direction. Oh, now it came over here. Now it came over here. Whoop, 90 degrees right toward Jamaica and then up through Cuba. Was that being steered by the government? Again, it's an extraordinary claim. I think it requires an extraordinary evidence to prove that. She said that Hurricane Aaron was also a state secret. The use of directed energy technology on a huge scale of it during 9/11 might very well have had weather-altering effects. Such technology might have been able to draw upon the vast energy and field effects of the enormous Tesla coil known as Hurricane Aaron. Thoughts of this kind are justified, even necessitated, by the fact of Aaron having been treated as a carefully kept secret, much like a state secret. So she's claiming that the path of that hurricane was kind of being hidden. The fact of the matter is it didn't affect New York City that day. The weather forecasters knew that the front was pushing it out. So where did the towers go, according to her? no planes, no thermite, I'm almost done, no iron microspheres, no explosions, no controlled demolition, even Building 7, not a controlled demolition, okay, Tesla weapons. No high heat, no smoke. Instead, she claims invisible forces using free energy from Hurricane Erin attacked the buildings from an unknown direction by unknown weapons of an unknown number and unknown types from unknown locations. Or I'm saying where the towers went, they were blown out, a huge radius. I'm saying Building 7 was a classic controlled demolition. The Twin Towers were taken down with high explosives and incendiaries. The motions indicate that the force was from inside the buildings and not outside from any directed energy weapons. The Twin Towers were blown out and away from its footprint, which explains why there was no stacks of pancake floors. And I'm done. If you want to have more information, I touched on most, but not all. Just go to my YouTube site. It's called The Last 30 Seconds Where the Towers Went. And I'm done. I'm sorry I took so long. I think I went a little bit over time there. So thank you for listening to my opinion. I'll stop sharing here.
All right, thank you. Thank you, John. We'll take Q&A, but before we do, there were a flood of comments and a couple of people got banned and then the third one got warned for ad hominem attacks. That will not be tolerated on Boston 9/11 Truth. Of course, disagreement is allowed and even encouraged. But attacking the person and not the evidence is not tolerated. If anyone doesn't know what ad hominem means, you attack what they say, not who they are. And so we will take questions at this point. Keep your questions down to 2 minutes, and they are to be questions, not comments. And you will allow John to answer the question without interruption. Violation of these rules will get you banned. I'm not shy about banning people who violate the rules. So, Chris Bergier, you're first up, and let me get my timer going.
Yeah. Can you hear me okay?
I can, Chris.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I'd like to do a quick screen share, and I want to show you a video that's been highly repressed in the evidence of the 9/11 Truth movement. I'm going to play it right here.
Is it less than 2 minutes?
Yep, it's going to take. Yeah, the video is only a couple seconds. Okay.
Okay.
Yeah, and so this video was taken from a Brazilian news channel, and they're looking at the towers as the dust is coming off. So I'm going to play it real quick. Now what you see here is you see a wave of dust penetrating right through a building wall like it's magic. Okay, so in my contention is what we're looking at here is very, very advanced technology. Okay. And when you say, well, we don't know what the placement of the directed energy weapons, as that wave of dust moves through the face of that building, you see peaks and valleys. So, my theory is the peaks and valleys correlate to the placement of the directed energy weapons. And this is also very similar to the Hutchison effect. He had anomalies where materials magically, went through other materials. So I guess my question to you, John, is, I mean, why are you so 100% sure that they didn't use advanced technology on 9/11?
Well, first of all, I'm hardly ever 100% sure. I am sure about some things as far as where they would have had to been located, or where the net force would have had to be, or otherwise it'd be the first time we violate the direction of motion. But for me, it's an extraordinary claim to say advanced weapons were used. I'm not saying it's absolutely impossible, but it's an extraordinary claim. And as Carl Sagan said, extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence. And so to me, it's a much simpler explanation by simple explosives, particularly since we found explosives. We found microspheres. We found nanothermite. It's there. To say that doesn't exist and to just hand wave and say, well, none of this other evidence exists, then you know, I personally have a difficulty with jumping to something else when it can be
Right. Well, let me just do a really quick follow-up on that. You could go to the 9/11 museum and you can see a Bible fused to a piece of solid steel, and you can see the steel covering the page of the Bible. So steel melts at 2,700 degrees Fahrenheit, and paper burns at 451 degrees Fahrenheit. So there is evidence. It just seems to me that, I mean, have you seen this piece of evidence in the 9/11 Memorial Museum with steel just dripping over a page of a Bible?
Yeah, no, I haven't been to the museum itself. I think I have seen this picture though. So the question is, okay, what was it when that steel was coming down? I don't have a good answer for you. But however, can it be explained by molten steel cooling very rapidly and burning some, I think it's a Bible, burning some of it, but still leaving some pages? Looks like we need to do an experiment, see if that can be done.
Yeah. Well,
let me ask. Can I ask you a quick question?
Hold on. Let me just explain. I mean, I happen to have a degree in aerospace engineering. I've taken heat transfer courses and all this stuff, and I could just tell you that there's no way you're going to get steel touching paper. I mean, where I work, there's a zinc kettle. You can take a notebook, throw it in a zinc kettle, it'll start burning instantly. Okay, so this is evidence that they should look at, John, in my opinion, and hopefully you can reformulate your theories based on this new evidence that we can see. So I'll end my question there.
Thank you.
Fair enough. Thank you.
All right. So next we have stop share screen. Thank you.
Yep.
Next we have Bob Runyon. Go ahead, Bob.
Yeah. I'm just curious if it has ever been done. You mentioned the famous ping pong ball experiment where the ping pong ball just drives right through the paddle. I would like to see if it's ever been done, or can we apply some energy and ask people to actually do it, to do the same experiment, only offset the ping pong paddle by 13 degrees in one axis and 6 degrees in a different axis, so that you have a two-axis offset like the pitch and yaw of alleged Flight 175, and see what difference that makes. It would be a simple experiment to do, and it would reveal what happens when there is an offset with a collision sort of event like that.
Yeah, I don't know if they've done it with a ping pong, but would there be some difference? I would think there would be some difference. It'd be a little bit of reflection, a little bit. But again, we're talking high impact, so the thing fragments, but the momentum's still going there. They do make water jets, okay? So you can, and then I show a water jet. So water is very soft, and yet it going high enough, it can cut steel. So those water jets can be angled at a piece of plate, I would think. We can probably go on the internet and find something. I'll bet it's still cut, but I don't know. I don't know. You could be right, Bob, but I got a funny feeling there's enough with a high enough velocity. Low velocity, nah, probably bounce right off. It's like that lead bullet. You're not going fast enough, and probably bounce off, and there's parts falling down. But with all the momentum going through there, I think it'll blow through. But I don't. To answer your questions, I don't know. I don't know of anybody who did it at a slight angle.
Okay. Thank you.
Thanks.
Okay, next we have Craig. Find your picture here. Here we go. Go ahead, Craig.
You're muted.
You're not muted, but we don't hear you.
Oh, can't hear you, Craig.
Oh dear, your microphone's not working.
I know what Craig's going to say, because he doesn't think the plane hit the Pentagon. I'm sure of that. We've had some discussions on that. So he and I disagree on that. We know that. He thinks everything flew north of the Sitco station, even though there's no physical evidence, and flew over the towers versus flew over the Pentagon. But anyhow, sorry.
We'll come back to you, Craig. When play with your microphone, see if you can get it fixed, and we'll come back to you. All right. And Raul, go ahead, Raul. Find your picture. You're here somewhere.
Yeah, can you hear me now? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so just to comment on that Bible on the steel, It wasn't fused. It could have been done with water. There was a lot of water being sprayed. And as we all know, water adheres to wood surfaces when it gets wet. Doesn't mean it was fused. Could have just been water. Um, I don't know if you mentioned this. Dr. Wood was claiming that some of the explosions were from the firefighter self-contained breathing apparatus tanks, the air tanks they wear on their back. None of them have exploded. There's no evidence at all that there were any explosions of air tanks on any of the firefighters. So, but she's claiming that was the source of the explosion. I don't know if you mentioned it. I was listening, but I might have missed it.
Yeah, I did. I touched on it.
John, the dews damaging the interior columns without damaging the exterior columns. Did you mention that? I might have missed it.
No, I didn't. That's in my video, but I didn't.
It's an important point to bring up, I think. If you could just comment on that.
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure. Thank you. So one of the things I brought up was the very first motion that was observed, and I'm not sure if I'm getting what you're driving at here, but the very first motion when the North Tower came down was actually a drop in the antenna. And so in order to drop the antenna first, and that's been proven by a recent paper, and a lot of us knew it, but David Chandler recently proved it, and he hasn't been debunked. If the antenna dropped first, that was held by the inner core columns and what's called a hat truss. In order for that antenna to drop first means that the inner core columns had to have been compromised first before the perimeter columns. So if the inner core columns were cut first, that means the dews, it had to be inside the towers, because you can't have a dew or something firing from the outside going through the perimeter columns, not affecting them at all, and then only attacking the core columns. So same with building 7. Building 7, the penthouse fell first before the perimeter. In order for that penthouse to fall, the supporting columns of the penthouse had to be cut. Well, if they were directed energy weapons or a Tesla or a microwave thing, it had to have snuck through building 7, cut the support for that very first fall, and then do it. So I don't know how. Again, the only way it can be done, as far as I know, is those dews would have had to been snuck inside building 7 and cut all the columns simultaneously in order to allow free fall acceleration, I think for like 8 stories. Okay, so the directed energy weapons had to be placed all in building 7, allowing it to free fall. And again, I don't know why you wouldn't just use cutter charges. We know how to take down buildings. Hundreds of them are taken down by controlled demolitions. It looks like a controlled demolition. Why would you use directed energy weapons to do or office fires, which just can't happen? Why would you just use a controlled demolition?
Right. And I would say that there's lots of buildings that we enter into where you see elevators out of service, there's signs, there's construction workers, there's tape, caution. So it could ease. We don't question any building maintenance that goes on when something's out of service. So it's totally believable that they had access to the interior through the elevator shafts. So as a firefighter, I think that's really plausible. Just the last thing real quick, are there any animations like Smithsonian or the History Channel? Are there any animations that you've seen that are more accurate than the other ones?
I just saw one. It came out, I'm going to say, within the last 6 months. And I don't know if it's coming out because I keep pushing the Spire issue, but the first animation that I showed, I think it was from Sabin, very popular on YouTube. He gets a lot of hits. I get none. He gets a lot. His first video didn't show that Spire. He redid it. Now he shows the Spire. And there's also another video that's out that was posted to one of mine. I happened to hit on it. And it's a computer animation showing the building coming, the towers coming down and kind of peeling off and then showing the Spire falling. But again, those are computer animations. And it doesn't mean it's real. Again, you can make pigs fly with a computer animation. You have to see the input files. You have to compare everything to make sure it's accurate. So I have seen some new ones that actually show the Spire, to answer your question, but they never used to show that.
Okay. Thanks, Susan. I'm done.
Thank you. Next, we have Bob Grenier. Am I pronouncing your name correctly?
Yeah, Bob Green is fine. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Yes.
Hi, Jon Cole. I really appreciated your presentation, firstly, so may I say thank you. It's nice to hear a fellow experimentalist work through their work. So I've got a couple of questions. I don't know how far we'll get through them. One, have you heard of the Usharenko effect?
No.
So this was in the 1960s, 70s in Russia. He was, I think, Belarusian. He was able to take a shape charge, replace the copper slug, which would ordinarily penetrate through steel, with some sand. And some of the sand grains, for some reason, were able to penetrate a full 30 centimeters into steel.
Wow.
And in the path of that, they did transmutations of the elements and led to fully vitrified channel. It's been replicated widely since. I've left a link to one of the replications that argues that it's a topological monopole or a monopole structure that does the work. So my second question is, are you aware that there are very many ways to create iron spheres?
Well, and that's the question, but I know one way is through the thermate reaction. So I'm sure there's other.
And that's true. Any significantly energetic process, for instance, a meteor coming into the atmosphere. With
I believe I do believe they were at that Tuscany. I think it was from the meteor, but I don't think
it might have been from a meteor. Yeah, I mean, there were.
I agree.
What you didn't mention in that particular thing is there was within the trees, inside the trees, they found these iron.
Yes, they did.
My whole journey to this area, I bought the narrative until 2017, but in 2016 I was doing something with a guy called Dr. George Eagley, and I'm not going to explain how I got it, but this $250,000 microwave reactor here, this was the end of that research. You put a standard magnetron in there, you put these fused quartz tubes in there, and you just put charcoal in there, and it synthesizes iron-rich crenellated spheres using charcoal and standing wave magnetic magnetohydrodynamic effects. And essentially, why George Eagley? Well, George Eagley was the world's expert in ball lightning. And Piotr Kapitsa's 1954 explanation for ball lightning, and Piotr, he won the Nobel Prize for the superfluidity of liquid helium in the 1930s. Brilliant scientist. He said it's basically scalar interferometry of microwaves that produces ball lightning. And when you get scalar interferometry, that is a wave that is 180 degrees out of phase with another wave. You get what's called waves that can basically pass through matter. And you can build up on the standing wave node, as in his 1954 paper, the ball lightning forms, and you can energize it. And it doesn't matter about having metal in the way. It's not a normal electromagnetic effect. And we have produced so to cut a long story short, I got into this field because I observed iron-rich crenellated spheres in here. I had a series of videos that I did on our YouTube channel, MFMP, called Stardust. You can go and see them. They're recorded in late 2016. And between late 2016 and early 2017, I was invited by Mahadevan Srinivasan, who built the nuclear weapons was a key researcher for the nuclear weapons for Babra Atomic Research Center for the Indian Nuclear Authority. He invited me personally to come and explain some aspects of cold fusion to researchers at IIT Mumbai.
Bob, you've well exceeded your 2 minutes.
Sorry.
Please wrap it up.
Well, essentially, I can give you 7 or 8 different ways, some of which are underwater, to create iron spheres.
I believe it. I believe it.
Yeah, and it's based on topological monopoles, and plasma is scale invariant. So you can produce these things at any size, up to multiples of the size of the Earth. And it does these kind of effects. Like this. It shreds steel, it fragments and turns to jelly, basically aluminium. I would love to have a deep dive conversation because I'm the world expert in this. I deal with US Navy. I deal with
Bob, thank you. Thank
the
you.
top people on planet Earth.
I have lots of hands and questions.
No worries. Go for it. Go for it. Yep.
It's we have to move on. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Bob.
It's okay.
Okay, Magnus, go ahead.
Oh, thank you. Great to see you, Jon Cole. This is Magnus from Norway. Great presentation. I have seen those three towers collapsing every day now since 2016, and in my opinion, there must have been some kind of very energetic material, something like RDX and nano thermite and commercial thermite. Can I please run a 10-second video, please?
Yep.
It goes very fast. Thank you. Here we go.
Yeah, I see that one.
Okay. So that's
Nanothermite.
yeah.
Yeah,
So,
Mark Basil did a lot of that years ago.
Yeah.
Did that at Worcester Polytech right here in Worcester, Mass.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've seen that.
Okay. Thank you. I'm trying to stop sharing screen right here. Thank you so much for being here, and thank you so much, and keep up the great work you're doing. And one last thing, can you please share 911c2c.org? It's a film series made by the Lawyers Committee for 9/11 Inquiry and Richard Gage. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Thank you, Magnus.
Thank you.
Okay, next we have Jerry. Go ahead, Jerry.
Hello, hello, John. Hope you can hear me. Brilliant presentation. Enjoyed it. I think you're really onto something with this spire, because that is the bit of destruction in the tower that we can see beyond the initiation, and I think that that's indicative of what caused it. I think you're onto that. I think there's a kind of sideline to get drawn into the whole. It was direct energy weapons. It was this or that. The kindest thing to say to the proponents of the direct energy weapon thing is, well, I agree with you that this was caused by an outside hand, that it wasn't the official story. But insofar as the spire goes, I would encourage you to go further into that. As these explosions are happening above it, at that level, there appears to be like elevators and stuff and a great amount of bracing. And I think that that bracing, the elevators are just outside of the core area. So how does this bit stay? You know, how does that happen? The only other point that I wanted to make was that when the South Tower was impacted, it swayed with the impact. So that's actually its stiff axis. With the short span floors, that's its stiff axis. If that had been an internal event, it would have went in its weak axis along the long span bit. But I think my main thing that I would like to say to you is that the spire, I think that you're really onto something with that. And thank you again for a brilliant presentation. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Jerry. And Jerry knows a heck of a lot more about those buildings, to be honest with you, than I do. I'm more of a kind of I'm not a generalist, but I mean, he really knows those buildings. I know he does. He's got the plans for them. And I think what you're talking about with the weak and the strong access, the perimeter of the towers was a square, but the inside was actually a rectangle. I think that's what you're saying. And there was
exactly, yes.
Right. So there were some shorter spans in one direction and longer floor trusses in the other. So
yeah,
I think
when you look at the core of the towers, they're rectangles, but they're at 90 degrees to each other, and this was to stop them acting in concert, so they're swaying in different directions. If there had been an internal event, the South Tower would have went away. It would have went in its weaker axis, but you can see that that's how it redistributes. You know, you've got this building in front of it, so you can gauge what's happening with the lines. You see it going with the impact, and then go in the other direction to redistribute it. But the spire, I think you've got a bit to go with the spire. I think it's a good area of research to continue on. But enjoyed your presentation so much. Thank you.
Thanks, Jerry. And that spire, I mean, you bring up a good point. There's a reason why that's there. There's a reason why it's those core columns. And I think it has to do with access as far as getting there. But I don't know. I'm not 100% sure. That's still an open question. But again, the fact that they're there means that all gravity collapse theories are absolutely impossible.
Yeah.
And as far as the sway, yeah, it's the old force behind the motion, which is what I like to say. If you see a motion, there's a force behind it that made it do that. And the impact of the planes is a perfect example of that. And yeah, there might be a little bit of a delay. Oh, I got some glue on my fingers. I was doing some carpentry. And yeah, there might be a little bit of a delay after the impact, but not much.
Mm-hmm.
It's in the same direction. So anyhow, thanks, Jerry, for the comment.
Can I just very quickly say something there? That area that you're talking about, you said to do with access, the elevators, that would be a difficult bit to access the core column splices. The core column splices are three or 4 feet above the floor, the slab level. Because there's an elevator there, it would be difficult to access that part, particularly at the mechanical equipment levels. Sorry for taking a bit longer than I should have there. So.
Yeah, interesting. That makes sense.
Okay, next we have Matthew. Go ahead, Matthew.
Yep. Hi, can you guys hear me? I want to share my screen quickly, if that's okay. I'll try to do it quick. Let's see. I click the share. And then if I go to Brave browser, okay, it should be here. Yeah, so share, I'll just play with sound. Okay.
It's
Okay.
less
Can you guys
than
see it?
2 minutes, isn't it?
Yeah, it's just gonna be flashing through images and so on. Basically, it's talking about the lack of rubble. So you said that the rubble exploded outward somehow. So just to give you an idea, first of all, this is the Liberty Plaza sphere. This is a lamppost. Keep that in mind. This is ground level. Those are the exterior lobby columns. Again, I'm going to zoom out back. This is how giant they are, and they're still standing. Nothing's on top of them. And so, in other words, where did these towers go? Did they explode somewhere away with no sound or heat or sparks or whatnot? So, anyways, this is the lamppost. Lamppost is still standing. Lamppost is still standing. So I want to show that. And then the other one is this image right here, before, after. There's the where towers go. Again, but basically the question is, it's not more a question, it's more about just showing for the audience and so on. And then even before the the building 7 fell, this is before, after. This is ground level. This is where this guy's person standing. That's about 300, 400 feet away. So, so where did these buildings quote explode? Did they explode up to the upper atmosphere and somewhere super hot, far away? And again, each tower was equivalent weight of 10 Titanics. So we have 20 Titanics missing. And I have this model here I can show it. I actually got Dr. Judy Wood this model printed out as well. A geoengineer from Alberta, Canada, sent this to me. Each one took 48 hours to print. So again, this is 20 Titanics. If there was 20 Titanics there's not going to be a debate where did this rubble go. So most of the steel turned out, not all of it, as you stated a couple times. And again, going further, this is ground level. Hundreds or thousands of people walking on ground level. It's not hot. Again, it's not that difficult to grasp. Again, there's very little heat on 9/11. Keep going further, and then here's a comparison quickly of thermite versus North Tower turning dust. This is a tiny bit of thermite, and you also need about like 800 degrees Fahrenheit just to start it. Okay.
Okay, that was 2 minutes.
Okay,
Thank you, Matthew.
All right, thanks. All right, sounds good. And I'll stop sharing. How do I do that? I don't know. Okay, if you can just cancel my share. I don't know where my Zoom is. Okay, there it is. I'll stop sharing. I don't know how to stop sharing.
You hover above, there should be a red button, stop share.
Okay. Just because I'm using
quickly,
like
while he's trying to do that, if you can hear me. So again, that's the argument. Hey, where did the towers go? Because there is no big stack of floors there, right? And that's the reason there's no big stack of floors, because it was blown outward. If you look at the pictures of Ground Zero, and they're in Dr. Wood's book, you'll see a lot of steel blown way out around them.
I'm showing you it. I have the full 3D model. The full 3D model shows nothing. There's literally nothing. Where are they at? Where are they at?
Oh, there it is. All that steel. Look at all that steel.
No, this is 20 Titanics. This is 20 Titanics. Is there even one Titanic? Building 6 has a giant hole to the ground level.
Yeah. Well, I think it's there. I think it's when it's blown out.
So you think it's there? I'm telling you, it's not there. It's not a thinking. This is evidence. I don't know what more you need. Anyways, I want to stop sharing.
Go back and forth on all that.
All right. Thank you.
Okay, sounds good. And I don't know how to stop sharing. I don't know where because I have a giant computer. I don't know. Okay, stop sharing this window. Okay, I'll stop sharing. Okay, I figured out.
All right.
Sorry about that, and have a good one. All right. Yeah.
Okay, Jean, Sandra, whichever one, or both of you.
We there? You hear me? All right. Thank you for John for doing that. Thank you, Sue, everyone being here. I'm going to go a little 30,000 foot level on this, and we all agree that fire cannot cause fire resistive steel framed high rises to collapse globally symmetrally. I think it's the path of most resistance. We all agree that. But we're all not agree on everything. With John, I don't agree on Shanksville. I believe that there was an engine found miles before the alleged crash site. There was also a crater that was reported by CNN, and I know a state cop that saw it. I live in Pennsylvania. Evidence of a shoot down. Pentagon, I'm leaning towards there was no plane, but I definitely believe there were explosives. So let's just say I agree totally with the towers evaluation, the building 7. You and I agree on so many things. There are things we're not going to agree on. People in this room, there's a lot of things we don't agree on. But is there anybody in here that does not want justice for 9/11? Is there one person in here that does not want justice for 9/11?
The person who just dropped off the call.
Well, I guess the person that just dropped off the call. All right. That's all I wanted to point out. Thank you, John. Thank you, everybody.
Thanks.
All right. Next, we have Craig. You got your microphone fixed, I hope?
You hear me?
Yep.
Yay!
Craig, we got you.
Yay, okay. All right. I can't, whenever I switch from one mic to another, I always have that problem. Okay. Given the short amount of time, I'm going to go through this quickly. I don't have a chance to address John's quip about there being zero evidence for a north path at the Pentagon. I've heard that now for the second time, so I'm not surprised to hear it. We don't have time to get into that exactly. But I do have three things I'd like to touch on quickly. One is I'm very curious, and this is not really my area of focus, but the engine core that you showed a photograph of it at Murray Street. I'm wondering why a thing like that, falling from that height, would not make a big crater in a sidewalk or in the street or whatever. Why does it look like it's just sitting there? That's the first thing. I've written these down in case we forget. The second one is you mentioned the Pentagon again, and I would like to know what you think could have, given that something you're claiming went through that exit hole or that alleged exit hole, and you said there's plane wreckage there. What do you think would have stopped the two 8,000-pound engine cores from making exit holes? Why would the center of the plane have gone through the wall, but not the two engine cores? And why would there be no foundation damage from the plane hitting on the first floor? That's my second question. And my third one is that given that you're part of the group that includes David Chandler, Ken Jenkins, and others that are focusing very much on pushing the plane impact of the Pentagon, why is it that your same group seems to be moving also towards the idea of arguing that a plane really did bury itself in the field in Shanksville? What is it that connects those two things that makes your group seem to want to push both parts of, I would argue, the official story?
That's 2 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'll see if I remember these things. I scribbled them down. So the first question was, why that engine that was on the sidewalk there? Hey, how come there wasn't a big hole there? Well,
yeah,
if you have that engine moving along and hitting that at, I don't know, 400 or 500 miles an hour, and it blows through there, is that final resting place? Was that the point of impact? Is it possible that it went through the building and may have bounced before then? I don't know. So that may be an answer. I haven't studied it, Craig, but I think the engine was there, and to have it snuck in there and placed there seems kind of questionable. So why isn't there a big impact hole? Well, maybe that's where its final resting place was after it bounced and rolled around, and finally that was its resting place. I don't know. Second question was, let's see, the exit hole, the engine core. I think this was on a Pentagon. You were asking, hey, how come the engines didn't blow through the C-ring hole? Well, yeah. when my opinion, when the plane hit, again, different masses of different parts of the plane, the most mass was in the center core body. I don't know what the percentage is, but I bet it's 60 or 70% was right there, okay? So the engines, they're rotating, they're spinning, they're high speed. They came in there pretty high speed, I think. When they start ripping apart, again, when that thing first hits the building, it shreds like crazy into a lot of small fragments, but the fragments are still moving. The engines are built a little tougher. They're spinning like a lot, like, I don't know, 10,000, 20,000 RPM. I don't know. You can look it up, whatever, but they're spinning. And so they're acting like kind of a top, you know, and so they could be bouncing around. You hit that at 500 miles an hour with something spinning at 10,000 RPM, that engine can be shredding itself, bouncing all over the place, bouncing the ceiling, bouncing the floor. And every bounce, every time you hit something, it takes a little bit more energy. So why didn't it go through? Well, the answer is probably because the energy was consumed bouncing around in there, hitting other columns and destroying all kinds of other things. And it just, that particular thing didn't have enough mass to punch through that C-ring hole. So
the fuselage did.
Huh?
But the fuselage did.
Right, because the fuselage had a lot of mass, a lot of particles. Most of the mass was in the fuselage. You had that front wheel. We found the front tire there. The front wheel was there. By the way, they did find a piece of that engine in there. You know, and you got all the DNA from all the passengers there, and that's a whole separate topic. I'm no DNA expert, but the point is, when you have a large mass, like it's my shotgun, blast a hole in a shotgun. Why didn't the perimeter pellets go through the wood? Okay, they're same velocity. Why didn't they go through the wood? And why did the center? Because the center had all these impacting particles constantly hammering through, battering through like a battering ram, like a jackhammer. You ever run a jackhammer? I have. You're hammering and hammering and hammering, and nothing happens. Finally, bam, something happens. So that's my reason, because those engines were spinning. It may have been bouncing around, absorbing energy. The last question.
And the foundation also. I mentioned the foundation, the concrete foundation with no gouges in it.
Did it? I don't know. I haven't studied the foundation. Yep. There were no scratches on the floor with the plane hit?
Well, there were no holes in the floor. There were no gouges. There didn't appear to be any damage to it at all.
Where was the first place the engines went? Where was the first place they went? When they hit the Pentagon and started exploding, where did the parts go? Did they go up, down, sideways? You don't know, and neither do I. So the answer is...
I'm not talking about just the engine. I'm talking about the whole plane.
Right.
So like there's literally no damage to that floor from anything.
That's true. There's a lot of damage to all the columns, and they were all bent the exact same direction. They were bent the same direction as the plane impact, and everything lines up perfectly. All the evidence lines up perfectly. So you and I will disagree. I think the plane hit the Pentagon because I think the physical evidence is overwhelming, and nothing else can explain that. So the third question is, why doesn't my group, I'm not in a group, I'm not really a group guy, although I am a member of AE and support this, but why does my group look at the plane impacts? Why do I agree with the official story as far as the planes? I want to go where the evidence leads to. So I think the planes hit the towers. That's the official story. Am I an official story supporter? If that's what you want to equate, because I think planes...
I wasn't talking about the towers. I was talking about Shanksville and the Pentagon.
Okay, well, the answer to any of them is wherever the evidence leads. That's the answer. So if the evidence leads to your flyover, fine. If it leads to a trail going into the Pentagon, that's where the evidence leads. I have no dog in this fight. So I think the preponderance of evidence, of physical evidence, sure does look like that Flight 77 hit that Pentagon. The hole's big enough and everything. So we can disagree, but that's why, because I want to follow whatever the evidence leads to, whatever it is.
Thank you, Greg. Next we have Jack. Go ahead, Jack.
Thanks. First, I want to say that I agree totally with you on the Twin Towers. And my question is going to be, why spend so much time on Judy Wood? There are people in Judy Wood's, supporting her who are not sincere players. But as a former, and before you answer, I just want to say, as a former Marine officer, I can tell you that the people who make new weapons and the generals and all the top people are giddy about, like Lindsey Graham, about using any kind of new weapon. So In Vietnam, they were using all kinds of new weapons. In Gaza, they're using all kinds of new weapons, which I can tell you about if you want. But I do believe that Judy Wood's that directed energy weapon was used. I don't believe it was a factor in the tower coming down. So why spend so much time arguing with the Judy Wood people?
Okay, yeah, well, actually, I'm not
Thanks.
arguing with her. I just did a book review. So, I mean, I've done a lot of different things, you know, with my experiments. So I just did a book review. I don't know if anybody's done it before. So why not? Why not do a book review?
Well, they all seem to take up more than half of the presentation, and that's not right.
Well, because as I said in the beginning, I merged two videos together because they kind of tied each other. I merged last year's video and this year's video. Yeah, it was half the presentation. That's exactly right. Because that's what it's a review of the video, which was a review of the book. So I did it.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you. We need to wrap this up very quickly. So the next two questions, since it's people who have already had a chance, you're going to be limited to 1 minute. So go ahead, Chris.
Yeah, can you guys hear me? Yeah, my question is limited to 1 minute. Let me just do a quick screen share again. I'm gonna hit share, and I'm gonna hit this video right here, and I'm gonna share it. This is a map of the Twin Towers, and it shows in the right-hand corner 200 feet. Now the steel, according to Jim Fetcher's research, the steel made it all the way over to the Winter Garden, which is 700 feet. So my question to you, John, how fast do you, if I was throwing a baseball from the top of the Twin Towers, how fast would it have to go to hit the Winter Garden?
Yeah, I don't know because I didn't do the calculations, but I do know that David Chandler.
Oh, okay. Well, I can tell you that the answer is 63 miles an hour.
That makes sense.
Yeah. So what type of an explosion? Yeah, it's a pretty wimpy explosion if it's only propelling something 63 miles an hour. Okay.
Well, it's pretty heavy steel sections too. Heavy.
Well,
steel.
yeah, but I mean, there could have been some magnetic reactions. You know, electrogravitic, magnetic, nuclear. I mean, that's what Dr. Wood says. So, I mean, this is hardly a conventional explosion that's propelling material laterally when a baseball going 63 miles an hour can hit the Winter Garden. I could throw steel. I could throw a baseball further than the majority of the steel that was witnessed on 9/11. So I just wanted to make that point, which is pretty important. So I'll end my question now.
Okay, thank you. And finally, Raul wants to ask a question too. But Jean and Sandra are next.
Yeah, it's just me, and I have nothing technical. I just wanted to thank you for the presentation, for the way you present. I want to thank you for the way that you answer every question you get. You don't deflect. You don't, engage in logical fallacies. When you don't know, you just say you don't know. You don't sound like you're trying to convince anybody or smack anyone over the head with what you think is right. So I love your research. I love everything you do. I love your personality, everything. It kills me that you think that a plane hit the Pentagon. That's all
Fair
I
enough. That's
say.
fair enough.
It hurts. It hurts because
I'm sorry. I didn't do it to hurt you, Sandra. I didn't do it to hurt you.
know.
By the way, just so you know, I didn't used to think a plane hit the Pentagon.
I know.
I didn't used to think it, and then the more I got into it, oh geez, looks like it did. It's like
Yeah.
not use a plane. So anyhow,
That's a good sign. You can change your mind. So that's
yeah. I learned new stuff, and it's like yeah. Anyhow, thank you for the comments.
So
Appreciate it.
anyway, it's just that.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Okay, Raul, you're next.
you're muted. You're still muted, brother. He's trying to get it. There it is.
Am I there?
Yep, you're good.
Okay. Okay, look, I need to say this one thing because this is to everybody. So where we're at in the 9/11 movement, everyone has their
explanations, but where we're moving forward right now with the entire group is really key on getting the fire service on board. And we're very, very close with Senator Ron Johnson. And in his last interview with Brett Weinstein, he again was calling for President Trump to look at this document that we're putting forward. Okay, that being said, in order to get the fire service to blow this thing even more wide open, and I'm at the tip of the spear as the writer, I have to be able to understand and explain a lot of this from a physics standpoint. And it's like Occam's razor. It's much easier with the evidence to explain demolition, which most people are familiar with. But for someone like me to write and to continue to write articles to convince the fire service using directed energy weapons and how they could have been employed. I mean, I don't even understand that technology, much less try to write it and put it in simple terms to persuade the National Fire Service. I'm not saying that they don't exist. I'm just saying it's easier and there's enough evidence that's irrefutable to go forward and convince the fire service that demolition, whatever type, was used. Doesn't have to be firecrackers, dynamite, thermite, whatever. It's just that this was not a gravitational fall based on the results of the fires that were generated in Tower 1, 2, and 7. And so it's hard enough to convince them just of that, but then to convince them even more that this space age technology called direct energy weapons, that's like an insurmountable obstacle that is going to be twice, if not like quadruple, to get the fire service to understand that and to agree upon that. And so that's one reason why I believe that Jon is spending a lot of time on the dues, is because we don't want to lose track of the momentum that we have to bring the families in the fire service to the reality that's going to put the political pressure for us to continue going forward. As if we do get this commission, there'll be plenty of time to discuss the directed energy weapons, because there'll be a table there where everyone can come together. But as a writer, I can't convince the fire service on something that I don't even understand myself. It's a lot easier for me, and it makes sense to know that there were demolitions involved, whatever type. And that's the answer to the question, why spend so much time on this, is because, you know, it's really important for the fire service to get behind this. Fire service and the families is going to be the key to us going forward. I hope that helps.
It does.
All right. Bob, I guess you're next, but this will be the last question. We need to move on.
Thank you, Susan. Raoul, I'd be very happy to explain to you about directed energy weapons. And I would also be very willing to do that to Jon Cole. And I would also be willing to write articles and also give testimony in any Congress. We've made matter disappear, we've teleported matter, we've made matter disintegrate in our experiments, and we've synthesized matter from other elements, including iron-rich spheres, where there's been no iron in a form that can do it other than by conventional heat, as one might think. So I can explain these things. If you choose to know, that is your choice. I can give you simple experiments that a 3-year-old can do with a cost of materials about $35, and it works 100% of the time. So it's about looking through the telescope now to accept that this is a real thing, and it was discovered in the 1950s, and it's the biggest secret.
Okay, and finally, Ross joined us late, so I'm going to allow one more question since he has his hand raised. Go ahead, Ross.
Well, thank you so much, Susan. I apologize. I couldn't get on the call. Won't get into that. But anyway, now that I'm on the call and I've got Jonathan here, that's so good. Jonathan, thank you for all your videos that you've done so far. And I just, since I haven't been on the call, couldn't be on the call, I want to ask you, you presented basically this information, I think a year ago you started presenting uh, this information, and I'm wondering what I missed. Have you altered it significantly from that presentation, those initial presentations a year ago?
No, not really. I mean, I added a couple of shotguns this time. I added some shotguns on the plane, but no, it's about the same. So yeah, well, I started doing this in 2010, but yeah, the last two videos I did a year ago, the last 30 seconds. And then I just did this Judy Woods thing over this summer. So it's basically the same. I missed out a few things that's in the video, but it's pretty much the same.
Okay, that's good. And then I wanted to ask you about your bio because I saw the bio on there, and I'm familiar with your work, regarding 9/11 Truth. But I'm wondering about your PE designation there. That's a kind of a broad designation, as you know. But Richard Gage mentioned that you had your own civil engineering business. Is that correct? Or maybe you can tell me more about your bio pre 9/11 Truth.
Well, well, I graduated from University of Connecticut in 1979, and I worked as a town engineer up in New England. I got my first PE in 1984. I have it in civil engineering. Civil engineering is kind of a broad topic. I took quite a bit of structural design courses. I don't say I'm a structural engineer because I don't want to get into an argument over that. As far as how, I've done some small bridges and buildings, but no, I don't do skyscrapers. So I never claimed to be a structural engineer, but I am a civil engineer. Civil engineer is a very broad engineering thing. We do structures. We do, like I say, I've done some small bridges. We do roadways. We do highways. We do utilities. We do paving. So anyhow, I got my PE in 1984 up in New England. And then they have what's called reciprocity. I have 3 or 4 others in other states. It's not a big deal. Once you get one, you can apply for reciprocity and get another one. So yeah, just a small engineering firm. I'm no longer the owner of it. I'm a part owner of it. And I don't ever bring my own company into this because the company's got nothing to do with this is a hobby for me. I don't make any money at this. It's a hobby because it's interesting. So yeah, civil engineer PE.
Okay, yeah, good. That's what I thought I had understood about it, and that makes sense to me. Also, so what I'm going to say, again, apologies for missing your earlier presentation tonight, but I would suggest to move the ball forward in your court of what you've been talking about regarding how the towers 1 and 2 were demolished. I would suggest putting back on that hat that you put on when you were working intensively with your business to promote and provide a bid, or at least approach your concept in terms of a professional bid for the project. In other words, you've got someone's given you this opportunity, a request for a proposal, and you've done that obviously before in your lifetime, and so then you have to say, okay, how am I going to get this done based on what you know about how you're going to do it? And you say, okay, I'm going to need this many guys. I'm going to need this many man hours. I'm going to need this many linear feet of cutting charges. I'm going to need this kind of access to the site. I'm going to need this, that, the other thing in order to pull this off. And that's going to cost you X amount of dollars. You don't have to put the dollar amount on it, but the time and the bid construction elements of it, and the schedule construction, the man hours elements are, I think, what's been missing in these proposals that we have, and are missing in all the hypotheses, is that they're not really addressing the actual on-site physical properties and circumstances that would have to be achieved, specifically a demolition construction document set, a DD set, which is not design development, but demolition construction document set, which would have had to have been produced. In other words,
Russ,
I'm wondering if you're going to wait.
I'm afraid we have to ask you to wrap this up, please.
Yeah, so
I've been limiting people on their questions. So please wrap it up.
yeah, so I'm wondering, Jonathan, have you thought about proceeding in that way in any way?
Frankly, no, I haven't. But I mean, I hear you. You know, but some people have talked about it. It would have taken years of planning, in my opinion, and an awful lot of work. But no, I haven't done it. But I hear you. Yeah, put an RFP together and figure out how it was all done.
Yeah, it's a lot of work.
It's a ton of work. It's a ton
It's
of
a lot of work.
Yeah.
Okay, that's it.
All right, thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone, for joining us tonight. And, you know, thank you, John, for your presentation. I think it was very informative. And the questions were very informative as well as your answers. So we're very, very honored to have you here, and I hope you come back.
Great. Thank you very much for having me. I'm probably not going to stay through the rest of your agenda, but I do appreciate
Okay.
everybody here, and I appreciate the dialogue. It was fun.
All right. And everyone stay tuned. Our next meeting is November 18th when we have Dan Noel. Thank you.
Good to see you,
Thanks,
John.
John.
Have a good night.